15-year-old Marcus Chun never imagined that a jar of earthworms and a laptop would change everything. By the end of this week, 3 families would lose their primary income. The school's entire administration would be under investigation. And the kid everyone called Computer Nerd would become the most feared student in Riverside High's history. But it all started with something much simpler: a family moving truck and a boy who just wanted to fit in. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The moving truck's engine coughed to life as the Chin family pulled away from their old house in San Jose. Marcus pressed his face against the car window, watching his childhood neighborhood disappear behind a cloud of diesel exhaust. His younger sister Emma was already asleep in her car seat, drooling on her stuffed robot, while their parents discussed logistics in the front seats. "The tech sector in Riverside is really growing," his father David was saying to his mother Lisa. "The company's expansion there made perfect sense. Fresh start for all of us." Marcus wasn't so sure about the fresh start part. At his old school, he'd been known as the kid who could hack the cafeteria payment system to give everyone free lunch, or the one who'd program the school's digital bulletin board to display custom animations during lunch breaks. He wasn't popular in the traditional sense, but he'd carved out his own niche among the other tech-minded students. Now, staring at the endless farmland rolling past their car, he wondered if anyone in Riverside even knew what Python programming was. The Chen family had spent the last 3 days driving across the country. David had accepted a senior software engineer position at Riverside Technologies, a growing company that specialized in educational software. The salary was significantly better than his previous job, and the cost of living in Riverside, Nebraska, was a fraction of what they'd been paying in California. Marcus pulled out his laptop and checked his phone's hotspot connection. Even in the middle of nowhere, he could still access his servers. Over the past 2 years, he'd built a small network of applications that he ran from his bedroom. Nothing illegal, just useful tools that other students at his old school had started using. A homework collaboration platform, a lunch menu scraper that sent daily notifications, and his personal favorite, a system that could predict which teachers would give pop quizzes based on their historical patterns. "Almost there," Lisa announced, consulting the GPS on her phone. "Riverside city limits in 15 minutes. As they crested a hill, Marcus got his first real look at his new home. Riverside wasn't the small farming town he'd imagined. The downtown area featured several modern office buildings, and he could see a sprawling high school campus in the distance. It actually looked promising. The Chen family's new house sat on Maple Street, a quiet residential area filled with 2-story homes and well-maintained lawns. As David backed the rental truck into their driveway, Marcus noticed several kids around his age hanging out at the end of the street. They weren't looking his way, but he felt that familiar anxiety that came with being the new kid. "I'm going to go set up my room," Marcus announced as soon as they were inside. The house was bigger than their old place, and his new bedroom had 2 windows and plenty of space for his desk setup. Within an hour, Marcus had his computer equipment arranged exactly how he liked it. 3 monitors formed a semicircle around his custom-built gaming chair, with his main desktop tower humming quietly underneath the desk. His laptop served as a 4th screen, usually dedicated to monitoring his various applications and servers. Emma appeared in his doorway, clutching her stuffed robot. "Are you going to make friends here?" "Maybe," Marcus replied, not looking up from his keyboard. He was already connecting to his old school's network remotely, checking on the systems he'd left behind. His replacement, a junior named Alex, had promised to keep everything running, but Marcus wanted to make sure there weren't any issues. "Mom says you should go outside and meet the neighborhood kids." Marcus glanced toward his window. The group of teenagers was still there, and now they seemed to be looking toward his house. One of them, a tall kid with bright red hair, was pointing in their direction. "Maybe tomorrow," Marcus said. "I want to get everything set up first." But Emma was already gone, probably to tell their parents about his reluctance to socialize. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, David appeared in the doorway. "Son, why don't you take a walk around the block? Get a feel for the area?" "I'm kind of in the middle of something." Marcus gestured at his screens, where lines of code were scrolling past. "The code will still be there when you get back. Fresh air might be good for you." Marcus sighed and saved his work. His father wasn't wrong. He'd been cooped up in the car for 3 days, and his back was definitely feeling it. "Fine, but just a quick walk." He grabbed his phone and headed outside. The late afternoon sun was warmer than he'd expected, and the air smelled different here, less like car exhaust and more like grass and trees. It was actually kind of nice. The group of kids had moved closer to his house, and Marcus realized they were definitely watching him now. He decided to take the direct approach and walk toward them. "Hey," he said as he got closer. "I'm Marcus. Just moved in today." The red-haired kid who'd been pointing stepped forward. He was bigger than Marcus had initially thought, probably 6 feet tall and clearly athletic. "I'm Tyler Brennan," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome to the neighborhood." "Thanks," Marcus replied, trying to read the group's dynamic. Besides Tyler, there were 4 other kids, 2 boys and 2 girls, all looking like they belonged on the cover of a high school yearbook. "Where'd you move from?" asked one of the girls, a blonde named Jessica, according to Tyler's quick introduction. "San Jose, California." "Ooh, fancy," Tyler said, and Marcus detected a hint of mockery in his tone. "What does your dad do?" "He's a software engineer, got a job at Riverside Technologies." Marcus noticed the group exchange glances at this information, but he couldn't interpret what they meant. "Cool," Tyler said. "So you're probably into all that computer stuff too, right?" "Yeah, I do some programming. Build websites, apps, that kind of thing." "Apps?" Another boy, Kevin, seemed interested. "Like for phones?" "Sometimes. Mostly web applications. One run a few small services that students at my old school used." Tyler's smile grew wider, but there was something predatory about it now. "That's awesome. We should definitely hang out. Maybe you could help us with some ... projects." Marcus felt a small warning bell go off in his head, but he pushed it aside. Maybe he was just being paranoid because he was nervous about making new friends. "Sure," he said. "I start at Riverside High on Monday." "Perfect," Tyler said. "We'll see you there, right guys?" The group murmured agreement, but Marcus noticed that none of them seemed particularly enthusiastic. Jessica looked almost sympathetic, while Kevin appeared to be studying Marcus like he was solving a math problem. "Well," Marcus said, suddenly feeling like he'd stayed too long, "I should get back. Still have a lot of unpacking to do." "Of course," Tyler said. "See you Monday, Marcus from California." As Marcus walked back toward his house, he heard the group's voices behind him but couldn't make out what they were saying. When he glanced back, they were all looking at their phones. Back in his room, Marcus tried to shake off the weird feeling from his encounter with Tyler's group. Maybe small-town kids were just different from what he was used to. He'd give them the benefit of the doubt. He spent the rest of the evening configuring his network setup and making sure all his applications were running smoothly. His homework collaboration platform had over 200 active users from his old school, and he took pride in maintaining 99.9% uptime. Around 10 p.m., his phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had sent him a friend request on Instagram. Tyler Brennan. Marcus accepted it and scrolled through Tyler's profile. Lots of photos from parties, sports events, and hanging out with the same group Marcus had met earlier. Tyler appeared to be popular, athletic, and from the expensive looking. Cars and houses in his photos, probably wealthy. Marcus was about to put his phone away when another notification appeared. Tyler had sent him a direct message. "Hey Marcus, excited to show you around school on Monday. You're going to love it here." The devil emoji at the end struck Marcus as odd, but maybe that was just Tyler's way of being funny. Marcus typed back a simple, "Thanks," looking forward to it, and set his phone aside. Outside his window, Riverside was settling into the quiet rhythm of a weeknight. Street lamps cast long shadows across the sidewalks, and the sound of distant traffic created a gentle background hum. It was peaceful in a way that San Jose had never been. Marcus turned back to his computer and opened his email. There were several messages from friends at his old school, asking how the move was going and whether he'd met anyone yet. He started to type a response, then stopped. What was he supposed to say? That he'd met a group of kids who seemed friendly but something felt off? That he had a bad feeling about the red-haired kid who'd already added him on social media? Instead, he wrote a generic response about the house being nice and looking forward to starting school. He'd have more to report after Monday. As he prepared for bed, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his encounter with Tyler's group was more significant than it had seemed. There had been something calculated about the way Tyler had asked about his father's job, and the way the group had reacted when he mentioned Riverside Technologies, but maybe he was overthinking it. Moving to a new place was stressful, and it was natural to be suspicious of new people. Tyler seemed like the kind of confident, popular kid who could make or break a newcomer's social experience. Making friends with him could be the best thing that happened to Marcus in Riverside. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Little did Marcus know that across town, Tyler Brennan was sitting in his own bedroom, but he wasn't thinking about being friendly. He was researching Riverside Technologies, specifically looking up David Chun's new position and salary information. Tyler's father worked in the same industry, and he'd learned long ago that information was power. And Tyler Brennan was very interested in power. Monday morning arrived with an unseasonably cold snap that had Marcus digging through boxes to find his heavier jacket. Riverside High School loomed before him like a red brick fortress, its windows reflecting the gray October sky. Students streamed through the main entrance in clusters, and Marcus felt the familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach that came with being the outsider. The administrative office buzzed with pre-first period chaos. Mrs. Patterson, the school secretary, handed Marcus his schedule along with a campus map and a student handbook thick enough to stop a bullet. "You'll want to get to Mr. Rodriguez's AP Computer Science class first," she said, highlighting the room number on his map. "Building C, second floor. Don't worry about being a few minutes late today. Everyone will understand." Marcus navigated the crowded hallways, dodging rushing students and trying to match room numbers to his map. The school was larger than he'd expected, with modern computer labs and what looked like a decent technology infrastructure. At least that was promising. AP Computer Science turned out to be a small class of about 15 students, most of whom looked up with mild curiosity as Marcus entered. Mr. Rodriguez, a young teacher with an infectious enthusiasm for coding, welcomed him warmly. "Class, we have a new student joining us from California. Marcus, why don't you tell us a bit about your programming background?" Marcus felt every eye in the room turn toward him. "I've been coding since I was 12. Mostly web development, some mobile apps. Run a few small platforms that students at my old school used for collaboration and stuff." A girl with purple-streaked hair raised her hand. "What kind of platforms?" "Homework sharing, study group coordination, a lunch menu scraper that sends notifications. Nothing too fancy." The purple-haired girl, who introduced herself as Zoe Martinez after class, seemed genuinely impressed. "That's actually really cool. Most people here think programming is just making websites for their parents' businesses." Marcus felt a surge of relief. Finally, someone who spoke his language. Want to sit with us at lunch? Zoe asked as they walked toward their next classes. There's a few of us who actually know the difference between Java and JavaScript. Definitely. Marcus replied, grateful to have found his tribe so quickly. The morning classes passed without incident. Marcus discovered that Riverside High's academic standards were actually quite high, and several teachers made references to students going on to prestigious universities. This wasn't the small-town school he'd been imagining. Lunchtime brought his first real test. The cafeteria was a typical high school social ecosystem, athletes at one set of tables, theater kids at another, various cliques maintaining their territorial boundaries. Zoe waved him over to a table. Near the windows where 3 other students were deep in discussion about debugging techniques. Marcus, meet the coding crew, Zoe announced. This is Alex Thompson, our resident cybersecurity expert, Sarah Kim, who's building an app for local farmers, and Danny Rivera, who somehow convinced the administration to let him redesign the school's website. Marcus felt himself relaxing for the first time since arriving in Riverside. These were his people, the kids who stayed up late solving problems that no one else even knew existed. So what's the tech scene like in California? Alex asked, pushing his thick-rimmed glasses up his nose. Pretty intense. Lots of competition, but also lots of opportunities. I had access to some amazing resources at my old school. What kind of resources? Sarah wanted to know. Marcus was about to answer when a shadow fell across their table. Tyler. Brennan stood behind him, flanked by the same group from Saturday, plus a few additional faces. Marcus, there you are, Tyler said with that same smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I've been looking for you all morning. Oh, hey, Tyler, Marcus replied, suddenly aware that the entire cafeteria seemed to have quieted down slightly. These are my new friends, Zoe, Alex, Sarah, and Danny. Tyler's gaze swept across the coding crew with obvious disdain. Right, the computer kids, he turned back to Marcus. Listen, we're having a little get-together at Kevin's house after school. You should come. Real food, not cafeteria garbage. Marcus glanced at his new friends, who were all staring at their food with uncomfortable expressions. Thanks, but I was actually going to— Nonsense, Tyler interrupted. You need to meet the right people if you want to have a good time at Riverside High. Trust me on this. There was something in Tyler's tone that suggested this wasn't really a request. Marcus felt the weight of multiple gazes on him, not just from Tyler's group, but from other tables around the cafeteria. Apparently, Tyler's invitations carried social significance. Okay, Marcus said reluctantly. I guess I could stop by for a bit. Perfect, Tyler said, his smile becoming more genuine. Kevin lives on Elm Street. Big white house with the circular driveway, 430. As Tyler's group walked away, Marcus turned back to find his new friends looking at him with expressions ranging from concern to outright alarm. Dude, Alex said quietly, you might want to be careful with that crowd. What do you mean? Zoe leaned forward, lowering her voice. Tyler's dad is Mark Brennan. He owns Brennan Construction. They basically built half the commercial buildings in town, including the new wing of this school. Tyler's used to getting what he wants. And what he wants isn't usually good for the people he gets it from. Danny added grimly. Sarah nodded in agreement. Last year, Tyler decided he didn't like this kid named Jake Morrison. By the end of the semester, Jake's family had to move to another town because Tyler made his life so miserable. What did he do? Nothing you could prove, Alex said. That's Tyler's specialty. He's smart about it. Psychological warfare instead of obvious bullying. Marcus felt his appetite disappearing. Maybe I should cancel. No, Zoe said firmly. If you blow him off now, you'll definitely become a target. Go to the party, be polite, and try not to give him any ammunition to use against you later. The afternoon classes dragged by as Marcus wrestled with growing anxiety about the party. He'd dealt with bullies before, but they'd always been the obvious kind, kids who shoved you in hallways or made fun of your clothes. Tyler seemed like a different breed entirely. At 4:30 sharp, Marcus found himself standing in front of Kevin's house on Elm Street. It was indeed big and white with a circular driveway, and expensive cars were parked along the curb. Through the windows he could see students moving around inside. Kevin answered the door with a red Solo cup in his hand, and the glassy-eyed look of someone who'd started drinking early. "Marcus, come in, come in. Tyler's been waiting for you." The house was impressive, marble floors, expensive furniture, and a kitchen that belonged in a magazine. About 20 students were scattered throughout the main floor, most of them holding drinks and talking in the loud, animated way that suggested this wasn't their first party of the school year. Tyler appeared from the kitchen, also holding a cup. "Marcus, glad you could make it. Want a drink?" "I'm driving," Marcus lied, since he'd actually walked the 6 blocks from his house. "Smart man. Come on, let me introduce you to some people." For the next hour, Tyler paraded Marcus around the party like a trophy, introducing him to various students and making sure to mention his father's job at Riverside Technologies each time. Marcus began to notice a pattern. Every person Tyler introduced him to seemed to have parents who worked in related industries: technology, construction, municipal government. "So your dad's the new senior engineer at RT?" asked a girl named Madison, whose father apparently worked for the city planning department. "Yeah, he just started last week. That's so cool. My dad says they're working on some big contracts with the school district. New educational software or something." Marcus nodded politely, but his programmer's mind was starting to detect patterns. Too many coincidences. Too many connections. Too much interest in his father's specific role. "Hey Marcus," Tyler appeared at his elbow again. "Want to see something cool?" He led Marcus upstairs to Kevin's bedroom, where a high-end gaming setup dominated one wall. 3 monitors, RGB lighting, the works. "Nice rig," Marcus said, genuinely impressed despite his growing unease. "Kevin's dad bought it for him last Christmas. It costs more than most people's cars." Tyler settled into the gaming chair and logged into what looked like a social media monitoring application. "Want to see something interesting?" The screen filled with profiles, posts, and what appeared to be private messages from various Riverside High students. "How did you?" Marcus started. "Kevin's got skills," Tyler said with a grin. "Turns out, if you know what you're doing, you can see a lot more of people's online lives than they think." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just casual social media browsing. This looked like systematic surveillance. "Why are you showing me this?" Tyler turned in the chair to face him directly. "Because I think you and I could be really good friends, Marcus. You've got skills I could use, and I've got connections you'll need to survive at Riverside High." "What kind of skills?" "Don't play dumb. Zoe Martinez already told half the school about your platforms and applications. You're obviously way more advanced than the usual computer geeks around here." Marcus realized he'd made a critical error. In trying to impress his new friends at lunch, he'd revealed information that Tyler could use against him. "I just build simple tools," Marcus said carefully. "Nothing fancy." Tyler's smile became predatory. "Simple tools that handle hundreds of users and maintain 99.9% uptime? Come on, Marcus. I did my research." The room suddenly felt smaller. Marcus realized that Tyler had been planning this conversation since Saturday, maybe even earlier. "What do you want?" "Partnership," Tyler said simply. "You help me with some projects, and I make sure your time at Riverside High is pleasant." "You refuse." He gestured at the screen full of private information. "Well, let's just say that being the weird computer kid from California could become very lonely very quickly." Marcus's mind raced. He was trapped between accepting Tyler's partnership or becoming a target. But there was a third option that Tyler probably hadn't considered. Marcus Chun hadn't built a network of applications and maintained them for 2 years by backing down from challenges. And Tyler Brennan was about to learn that underestimating the weird computer kid was a very dangerous mistake. "I need to think about it," Marcus said finally. "Of course," Tyler replied, his smile never wavering. "Take your time. But not too much time. I'd hate for people to get the wrong impression about you." As Marcus walked home through the darkening streets of Riverside, his mind was already working on a different kind of code, one that would show Tyler Brennan exactly what kind of simple tools a motivated programmer could build. Tuesday morning brought an unwelcome surprise waiting in Marcus's locker. A folded piece of paper fell out when he opened the metal door, and he immediately recognized Tyler's handwriting. "Hope you had time to think. Meet us at the old maintenance shed behind the gym after school. Time to discuss our partnership." T. Marcus crumpled the note, his jaw clenching. He'd spent most of the previous night researching Tyler's family and friends, using publicly available information to build profiles on each member of the group. What he'd discovered made his blood run cold. Tyler's father, Mark Brennan, didn't just own Brennan Construction. He was on the school board and had significant influence over local government contracts. Kevin's mother worked for the district attorney's office. Jessica's father was a lieutenant in the Riverside Police Department. Madison's dad controlled city planning approvals. Tyler hadn't just surrounded himself with popular kids. He'd built a network of power that extended far beyond high school hallways. "You look like someone kicked your dog," Zoe said, appearing beside his locker with her usual stack of computer science textbooks. "Tyler wants to meet after school." Zoe's expression darkened. "That's not good. When Tyler calls meetings, it usually means someone's about to have a very bad time. Any advice?" "Yeah, don't go alone and definitely don't agree to anything he suggests. Tyler's got a talent for making terrible ideas sound reasonable." Marcus nodded, but he was already formulating a plan that didn't involve following anyone's advice. He'd learned long ago that the best defense against bullies was preparation, and he had skills that Tyler couldn't possibly anticipate. During lunch, Marcus excused himself from the coding crew's table and found a quiet corner of the library where he could work on his laptop without interruption. Over the next 30 minutes, he deployed 3 small applications to various cloud servers, tools he'd originally built for harmless purposes, but could easily be repurposed for digital reconnaissance. The first was a social media aggregator that could pull public posts, photos, and comments from multiple platforms and organize them by person, location, or keyword. The second was a network scanner that could identify devices connected to local Wi-Fi networks and catalog their basic information. The third was a simple keylogger disguised as a harmless browser extension, though he had no immediate plans to use that one dot by the time the lunch period ended. Marcus had comprehensive digital profiles on Tyler's entire inner circle, including their parents' professional connections, social media habits, and even their approximate home network configurations based on geotagged photos and posts. The afternoon classes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Marcus found himself unable to concentrate on anything except the upcoming confrontation. He'd dealt with bullies before, but never ones with this level of sophistication and social power. At 3:15, the final bell rang, and Marcus made his way toward the gym. The maintenance shed sat in a secluded area behind the building, partially hidden by a cluster of oak trees. It was the perfect location for a conversation that Tyler didn't want witnessed. Tyler was already waiting when Marcus arrived, along with Kevin, Jessica, and 2 other students Marcus recognized from the party but hadn't been formally introduced to. They were arranged in a semicircle facing the shed's entrance, clearly intended to make Marcus feel surrounded. "Marcus!" "Right on time," Tyler said with false cheerfulness. "I appreciate punctuality. What do you want, Tyler?" "Straight to business. I like that." Tyler pulled out his phone and showed Marcus the screen. It displayed what appeared to be a chat log between Marcus and someone named Shadow Admin, discussing ways to bypass school firewalls. Marcus's stomach dropped. The conversation was completely fabricated, but it looked convincing enough to get him expelled if shown to the wrong people. "Impressive Photoshop work," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Thanks. Kevin's got real talent for digital manipulation. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter if it's real or not." "What?" "Matters is what people believe." Tyler pocketed his phone. "The administration takes cybersecurity very seriously these days. Something about protecting student data and preventing hacking incidents." Jessica stepped forward, her expression almost apologetic. "Tyler's not trying to be mean, Marcus. He's just explaining how things work around here." "Right," said Kevin. His voice slightly slurred from whatever he'd been drinking during lunch. "Tyler helps people find their place in the social ecosystem. It's actually kind of generous when you think about it." Marcus realized this was a well-rehearsed routine. Tyler played the reasonable leader, Jessica provided the sympathetic voice, and Kevin served as the obvious threat. The two unnamed students were just there for intimidation. "So what's your proposal?" Marcus asked. Tyler's smile widened. "Simple. You help us with some technical projects, and we help you avoid unpleasant situations like false accusations and social isolation. Win-win." "What kind of technical projects?" "Nothing illegal," Tyler said quickly. "Just some harmless information gathering. Maybe help us understand what certain people are doing online. Monitor some social media accounts. Basic stuff that someone with your skills could do in their sleep." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. Tyler wasn't just running a high school bullying operation. He was building an intelligence network. The kind of information he could gather with Marcus's help would give him power over students, teachers, and potentially even parents. "And if I refuse," Tyler shrugged, "then you'll discover that Riverside High can be a very unwelcoming place for students who don't fit in. Rumors spread quickly here. Academic accusations stick around forever. Social isolation can be devastating." One of the unnamed students, a muscular kid who looked like he spent more time in the weight room than the classroom, cracked his knuckles loudly. "I need time to think about it," Marcus said. "Of course, take until tomorrow. But Marcus?" Tyler's friendly mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Don't make the mistake of thinking you can outsmart this situation. I've been playing this game a lot longer than you have." As the group dispersed, Marcus remained by the maintenance shed for several minutes, his mind racing. Tyler was right about one thing: this was a game. But Tyler had made a critical error in assuming that Marcus was just another potential victim. Marcus Chun had been building and maintaining complex systems since middle school. He understood networks, data flow, and system vulnerabilities better than most adults. And Tyler Brennan had just made the mistake of revealing his entire operation structure. Walking home, Marcus pulled out his phone and sent a carefully worded message to his old friend Alex back in San Jose. "Hey, remember that distributed monitoring system we talked about building? I think I'm ready to start that project." The response came back within minutes. "Everything okay? You sound stressed." "Just dealing with some local politics. Nothing I can't handle." That evening, Marcus sat in his bedroom surrounded by multiple screens, each displaying different aspects of his reconnaissance work. He'd spent 2 hours analyzing the digital footprints of Tyler's network, and what he'd discovered was both impressive and terrifying. Tyler's group maintained detailed files on dozens of students, including private communications, family financial information, and embarrassing photos or videos. They'd used this information to manipulate elections for student government, influence teacher recommendations, and even affect college application outcomes. But they'd also made mistakes. Big ones. Their surveillance tools were sophisticated but sloppy, leaving digital fingerprints all over the school's network. They'd accessed restricted databases without proper authorization, violating multiple federal laws. Most damning of all, they'd stored their collected information on servers that belonged to their parents' businesses, servers that Marcus could access if he really wanted to. Marcus leaned back in his chair and smiled for the first time since arriving in Riverside. Tyler Brennan thought he was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. But Marcus had just discovered that Tyler wasn't even playing on the same board. His phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Hope you're making the right decision." "See you tomorrow," Marcus typed back, looking forward to it. But he wasn't planning to give Tyler the answer he expected. Instead, Marcus was going to show him what happened when you threaten someone who actually understood how to use technology as a weapon. The war was about to begin, and Tyler Brennan had no idea what he'd just started. Outside his window, Riverside settled into its usual quiet evening rhythm. But in bedrooms and basements throughout the town, servers hummed with activity as Marcus's applications began their work. By morning, he would know more about Tyler's operation than Tyler knew himself. And by the end of the week, the balance of power at Riverside High was going to shift dramatically. Marcus opened a new terminal window and began typing. He had work to do. Wednesday morning arrived with Marcus feeling more confident than he had since moving to Riverside. His overnight digital reconnaissance had yielded a treasure trove of information about Tyler's network, including security vulnerabilities that could bring down their entire operation. But as he walked through the school's main entrance, he realized Tyler had been busy too. "Did you hear about the new kid?" Marcus caught fragments of conversation as he passed groups of students. "Tyler says he's some kind of hacker. His dad's company is under investigation. Probably why they moved here." Marcus felt his confidence evaporate. Tyler was already deploying his disinformation campaign, seeding rumors that would isolate Marcus before he could build a support network. It was a masterful preemptive strike. At his locker, Marcus found another note. "Cafeteria. Lunch. Final. Answer time. Don't disappoint me." "You look like you're about to throw up," Zoe observed, appearing beside him with her usual stack of books. "Tyler's spreading rumors about me." "Yeah, I heard some of them. Pretty creative stuff. He's claiming your family fled California because your dad was involved in some kind of corporate espionage scandal." Marcus slammed his locker shut harder than necessary. "That's completely insane." "Of course it is. But Tyler's good at making insane things sound plausible. He probably spent all morning planting seeds with the right people, student council members, team captains, kids whose parents work in tech. By the end of the day, half the school will believe some version of his story. So what do I do?" Zoe studied his face carefully. "You could give Tyler what he wants. Play along until you graduate and get out of here. Or you could fight back. But Marcus, if you choose that route, you better be absolutely sure you can win. Tyler doesn't just defeat his enemies, he destroys them completely." Marcus spent the morning classes barely paying attention to lectures, his mind focused on the decision ahead. He could submit to Tyler's demands and spend the next 3 years as a digital servant, helping to spy on his classmates and maintain Tyler's power structure. Or he could take the risk of fighting back, knowing that failure would mean complete social annihilation. By the time lunch period arrived, Marcus had made his choice. The cafeteria buzzed with an unusual energy as Marcus entered. He immediately noticed that Tyler's table had expanded. Instead of his usual core group, at least a dozen students sat around him, all focused on their phones or engaged in animated conversation. Tyler had clearly been holding court, spreading his version of events to anyone willing to listen. Marcus grabbed a tray and moved through the lunch line, acutely aware of the stares and whispered comments following him. When he reached the coding crew's table, he found only Alex and Danny waiting for him. "Where are Zoe and Sarah?" Marcus asked, settling into his usual seat. Alex looked uncomfortable. Zoe's in the computer lab working on a project. Sarah ... Well, her parents heard some rumors about you and told her to keep her distance until things get sorted out. What kind of rumors? Danny leaned forward, lowering his voice. Tyler's been telling people that your dad was fired from his last job for stealing code and selling it to competitors. Says that's why you know so much about hacking and surveillance, because your family's been involved in corporate espionage. For years, Marcus felt his appetite disappear completely. Tyler's story was sophisticated enough to sound believable while being impossible to quickly disprove. That's insane, Marcus said. We know, Alex replied. But Tyler's got credibility, with a lot of people here, and he's been very strategic about who he's telling what version of the story to. Before Marcus could respond, Tyler himself appeared at their table, flanked by Kevin and Jessica. The entire cafeteria seemed to quiet down, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Marcus, Tyler said with his trademark smile, I hope you've had time to consider our conversation yesterday. Marcus looked up at him, acutely aware that dozens of students were watching this interaction. Whatever happened next would define his entire high school experience. I've been thinking about it, Marcus said carefully. Excellent. And what conclusion did you reach? Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. I think you're full of shit, Tyler. And I think it's time someone called you on it. A collective gasp went through the nearby tables. Tyler's smile faltered for just a moment before returning, though it looked more forced now. That's unfortunate, Tyler said. I was really hoping we could work together. But I suppose some people prefer to learn things the hard way. Kevin stepped forward, pulling out his phone. Maybe Marcus would like to see what we've been working on this morning. The phone screen displayed what appeared to be a forum post, with Marcus's name and photo, discussing security vulnerabilities in educational software and offering to demonstrate weaknesses in school systems for the right price. Impressive, Marcus said, examining the fabricated evidence. How long did it take you to fake that? Who says it's fake? Tyler replied. Kevin's got quite a talent for digital archaeology. Sometimes he finds things that people thought they'd deleted. Marcus realized Tyler was escalating beyond simple intimidation. The fabricated forum post could get him expelled and potentially face criminal charges if shown to the wrong authorities. Here's what's going to happen, Tyler continued, his voice carrying just far enough for nearby tables to hear. You're going to prove you're not the security threat some people think you are. Simple demonstration of trust. What kind of demonstration? Tyler's smile became genuinely predatory. Well, since people are saying you think you're better than everyone else here, maybe you'd like to show us how tough you really are. Kevin produced a small glass jar from his backpack. Marcus's stomach clenched as he saw what was inside. A collection of earthworms, dirt still clinging to their segmented bodies. What the hell is that? Lunch, Tyler said simply. See, Kevin here has a theory that all these tough computer kids from California are actually pretty soft when it comes to real challenges. So here's the deal, you eat what's in that jar, and we'll consider your debt to society paid. Refuse, and that forum post finds its way to Principal Henderson's desk before the end of the day. The cafeteria had gone completely silent now. Marcus could feel hundreds of eyes focused on him, waiting to see how the new kid would handle Tyler's challenge. You're insane, Marcus said. Maybe, but I'm also very influential. Ask around when Tyler Brennan makes a prediction about someone's future at this school. It usually comes true. Marcus looked at the jar of worms, then at Tyler's expectant face, then at the sea of students waiting for his response. He thought about his parents, who had moved across the country for a fresh start. He thought about his sister Emma, who would have to grow up in this town. He thought about the 3 years of high school stretching ahead of him, but mostly, he thought about the files he'd discovered on Tyler's servers the night before. Files that contained enough evidence to destroy Tyler's entire operation and potentially send several adults to prison. "1 jar of worms," Marcus said slowly. "And you leave me alone? That's the deal. Eat what's in the jar, and we'll call it even." Marcus reached for the jar, feeling the cool glass under his fingers. Tyler's smile widened as he anticipated his victory. But Marcus had spent the last 18 hours learning everything there was to know about Tyler Brennan's digital empire. And he'd discovered something Tyler didn't know he knew, something that was going to turn this humiliation into the first move in Tyler's complete destruction. "All right," Marcus said, unscrewing the jar's lid. "But I want everyone to record this. If I'm doing this, I want proof that Tyler Brennan keeps his word." Tyler looked momentarily surprised by this request, but nodded. "Fair enough. Everyone get your phones out." As dozens of smartphones emerged from pockets and backpacks, Marcus smiled grimly. Tyler thought he was about to capture Marcus's humiliation on video. Instead, he was about to provide Marcus with exactly the evidence he needed to bring down everything Tyler had built. Marcus lifted the jar toward his mouth, and the entire cafeteria held its breath. The next few hours passed in a blur of interviews with investigators, meetings with school administrators, and phone calls from reporters who'd received copies of the evidence. Marcus learned that his automated systems had been even more effective than he'd planned. The story was already trending on social media platforms across multiple states, and news outlets from coast to coast were picking up the story of the high school surveillance scandal. Federal investigators arrived within 3 hours, having been alerted by Marcus's automated evidence submission system. The scope of the corruption they uncovered exceeded even the most pessimistic projections. Tyler's family had been operating what amounted to a local crime syndicate, using their legitimate businesses as fronts for bribery, fraud, and systematic abuse of public trust. The technological sophistication of their operation impressed even experienced cybercrime investigators. Tyler's surveillance network had included advanced facial recognition software, social media monitoring algorithms, and encrypted communication channels that rivaled those used by professional intelligence agencies. The fact that it had all been deployed against high school students made it even more disturbing. Marcus found himself at the center of a media storm that reached far beyond Riverside. His story became a case study in how technology could be used both to oppress and to liberate, depending on who controlled it and how they chose to deploy it. Cybersecurity experts praised his methodical approach to evidence gathering, while child advocacy groups highlighted the psychological trauma that Tyler's network had inflicted on its victims. The legal ramifications unfolded over several weeks. Mark Brennan's construction company faced federal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. Their contracts with multiple school districts across Nebraska were terminated, and investigators discovered similar schemes operating in Iowa and Kansas. The total financial damage exceeded $12 million across multiple jurisdictions. Kevin's mother lost her position with the prosecutor's office and faced disbarment proceedings for violating attorney-client privilege and obstructing justice. The cases she'd compromised through her illegal information sharing required complete review, potentially affecting hundreds of criminal prosecutions over the past 2 years. Jessica's father was terminated from the police department and charged with abuse of power, filing false reports, and conspiracy. His actions had compromised numerous investigations and violated the civil rights of dozens of families who'd been targeted by Tyler's operation. But the human impact was what Marcus found most satisfying. Students who'd been terrorized by Tyler's psychological warfare began speaking openly about their experiences. Academic performance improved dramatically among Tyler's former victims, as they no longer had to navigate constant surveillance and manipulation. Several students who'd been considering transferring to other schools decided to stay at Riverside High. The coding crew became local celebrities, with Zoe, Alex, Sarah, and Danny receiving recognition for their role in supporting Marcus during his investigation. Their computer science program received additional funding from the school district, partly as acknowledgement of how technology education could serve as a defense against digital predators. Marcus's own family experienced unexpected benefits from the scandal's resolution. David Chun's employer, Riverside Technologies, gained national attention as the company that had hired the father of the Riverside whistleblower. Their stock price increased significantly, and David received a promotion along with recognition for raising a son with such strong ethical principles. Emma, Marcus's younger sister, became something of a celebrity at her elementary school as the sibling of the kid who'd brought down the bad guys. She handled the attention with typical 8-year-old directness, informing anyone who'd listen that her brother was obviously the smartest person in the world, and that anyone who messed with him was super dumb. By the end of the day, Mark Brunon's construction company had lost its contracts with the school district and was under investigation for fraud spanning multiple states. Kevin's mother had been suspended from the prosecutor's office pending a criminal investigation that would eventually result in her disbarment and federal charges. Jessica's father was facing internal affairs scrutiny that would lead to his termination and prosecution for abuse of power. Tyler himself had been arrested on multiple federal charges related to computer fraud, identity theft, invasion of privacy, and conspiracy. The evidence Marcus had compiled was so comprehensive that Tyler's attorneys immediately began discussing plea bargain arrangements rather than attempting to mount a defense. The surveillance equipment Tyler's network had been using was confiscated as evidence revealing the true scope of their operation. Hidden cameras in school hallways, keyloggers on public computers, and sophisticated social media monitoring software that had been tracking students' online activities across multiple platforms. The technology had cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, funded through the family's various criminal enterprises. As Marcus walked home through the streets of Riverside that evening, his phone buzzed continuously with messages from classmates who wanted to thank him for exposing Tyler's operation. Students who'd been victimized for months or years were finally free to speak openly about their experiences. The psychological relief was palpable throughout the school community, but Marcus also received messages from unexpected sources. Former victims of Tyler's operation who'd graduated in previous years reached out to share their own stories of harassment and manipulation. Parents thanked him for giving them insight into their children's struggles. Teachers expressed gratitude for finally understanding why certain students had seemed anxious or withdrawn. Zoe caught up with him as he reached his street, practically glowing with excitement. "So," she said with a grin that stretched from ear to ear, "how did those worms taste?" Marcus laughed, feeling lighter than he had since arriving in Riverside. The nausea from his cafeteria performance had finally subsided, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment. Terrible. Absolutely disgusting. But totally worth every single bite. What happens now? I mean, Tyler's gone. But what about all the other students who were part of his network? Marcus had been thinking about that question all afternoon. Most of them were victims themselves in a way. Tyler manipulated them by offering social protection in exchange for complicity. Now that his power structure is gone, they'll have a chance to make different choices. And if they don't, then we'll be watching. The tools I built to expose Tyler's operation can be repurposed to protect students from future threats. Think of it as an early warning system for institutional bullying. Zoe's eyes lit up with understanding. You're not just tearing down Tyler's network, you're building something better to replace it. Exactly. Tyler used technology to concentrate power and abuse people. We're going to use it to distribute power and protect people. Same tools, completely different philosophy. That evening, as Marcus sat in his bedroom updating his applications and monitoring the continued fallout from the day's events, he received a text from his father. Saw the news coverage. Are you okay? Your mother and I are incredibly proud of you. Marcus typed back. Never better, Dad. Riverside's turning out to be exactly what we needed. Sometimes you have to fight for your place in the world. Just remember that fighting doesn't always require eating earthworms. Though I have to admit, your approach was certainly memorable." Marcus smiled at his father's response. David Chun had always encouraged him to use his technical skills responsibly, but probably never imagined those skills would require such literal stomach fortitude to deploy effectively. Outside his window, the quiet streets of Riverside looked the same as they had when his family first arrived just 1 week earlier. But everything had fundamentally changed. The balance of power had shifted permanently, and the students who'd lived in fear of Tyler Brennan were finally free to pursue their education without constant surveillance and psychological manipulation. Marcus Chun had come to Riverside as the new kid trying to fit in, hoping to find his place in an unfamiliar social ecosystem. He was ending his first week as the student who'd single-handedly dismantled the most sophisticated bullying operation in the school's history, protecting not just himself but dozens of other students who'd been suffering in silence. And he'd accomplished it all with nothing more than code, determination, and a jar of earthworms that he'd never forget tasting. As he settled in for the evening, Marcus opened his laptop and began working on a new project, a secure communication platform for students who'd been victims of cyberbullying. The application would allow anonymous reporting of harassment, provide resources for psychological support, and create networks of mutual protection among students facing similar challenges. Because if there was one thing Marcus had learned from his first week in Riverside, it was that technology was only as dangerous or beneficial. Final part. Digital warfare. Marcus lifted the first worm from the jar, its slimy surface glistening under the cafeteria's fluorescent lights. The entire room had fallen into an eerie silence, broken only by the subtle clicks and beeps of phones recording the moment. Tyler stood behind him, radiating satisfaction as he watched what he believed was Marcus's complete humiliation. What Tyler didn't know was that Marcus had spent the previous night doing more than just reconnaissance. He'd also deployed a sophisticated malware package across Tyler's entire network, a digital time bomb waiting for the perfect moment to detonate. The code had been elegantly designed, using Tyler's own surveillance infrastructure against him like a digital jujitsu move. Marcus had also sent encrypted messages to his former classmates in California, recruiting their help for what he internally called Operation Earthworm. His old coding crew had spent hours crafting specialized scripts that would ensure simultaneous distribution across multiple platforms when the moment arrived. Marcus bit down on the worm, fighting every instinct in his body as the creature's earthy taste filled his mouth. The texture was worse than the flavor, a grotesque combination of soil and something indefinably organic that made his stomach clench. The cafeteria erupted in a mixture of cheers, gasps, and disgusted groans. Several students turned away, unable to watch, while others leaned forward with morbid fascination. Emma would be horrified if she saw this, Marcus thought briefly. His little sister believed her big brother could solve any problem with his computer skills. She'd never imagined those skills would require him to literally eat dirt to achieve victory. "One down," Tyler announced loudly, clearly enjoying his moment of power. The declaration echoed through the cafeteria like a medieval executioner calling out each stroke of punishment. "How many more in that jar, Kevin?" 9, Kevin replied, his own phone capturing every moment of Marcus's ordeal. His hands shook slightly as he recorded, whether from excitement or nervousness. Marcus couldn't tell. Tyler's other followers formed a loose circle around the scene, creating a human amphitheater for the spectacle. Madison recorded from multiple angles. Jessica documented reactions from other students, and even some of Tyler's peripheral hangers-on had materialized to witness what they assumed would be Marcus's complete social destruction. As Marcus reached for the second worm, his phone buzzed with a text notification. Without missing a beat, He glanced at the screen while lifting the worm to his mouth. The message was from an automated system he'd set up. Package delivered. All systems green. Additional status updates flowed in. Network penetration complete. Data extraction 47% in climbing. Distribution channels armed and ready. Marcus smiled slightly as he bit into the second worm, this one somehow even more revolting than the first. The smile wasn't lost on Tyler, who interpreted it as either bravado or the onset of psychological breakdown from stress. "Look at him," Tyler said to his audience, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "California boy thinks this is some kind of game. Wait until reality hits him." But Marcus's reality was unfolding exactly according to plan. Each worm he consumed bought him precious minutes for his automated systems to work their digital magic. His infiltration protocols were systematically mapping Tyler's entire network topology, identifying every device, every account, every hidden file that Tyler thought was secure. The third worm proved to be the worst yet. Apparently it had been dwelling in particularly rich soil, because the taste was overwhelmingly organic and earthy. Marcus's gag reflex activated involuntarily, and for a terrifying moment, he thought he might actually vomit everything back up. Tyler would undoubtedly claim victory if that happened, regardless of how many worms Marcus had already consumed. "Having trouble there, Marcus," Tyler taunted. "We can always call this off if you want to admit defeat." "I'm fine," Marcus managed, though his voice came out somewhat strained. He reached for his water bottle and took a small sip, just enough to clear his throat without diluting his stomach acid too much. He'd researched the biological aspects of his challenge the night before, determining optimal strategies for consuming unusual organic matter without triggering his body's rejection mechanisms. By the time Marcus had consumed his fifth worm, fighting waves of nausea with each bite, his phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. His automated systems were working exactly as planned, systematically accessing and downloading everything from Tyler's network servers. The progress reports painted a picture of digital domination that would have made Sun Tzu proud. Data extraction 78% complete. Vulnerability mapping identified 23 critical security flaws. Evidence compilation 847 compromising files cataloged. Distribution network 312 recipients confirmed and ready. The beauty of Marcus's approach lay in its surgical precision. Rather than simply destroying Tyler's data or crashing his systems, actions that could be dismissed as generic hacking, Marcus was methodically documenting every illegal activity, every privacy violation, every abuse of power that Tyler's network had committed. The evidence would be irrefutable and legally actionable. Marcus had learned from studying historical cyber warfare cases that the most effective digital attacks weren't about causing immediate chaos, but about gathering intelligence that could be weaponized strategically. Tyler's operation would be dismantled not through brute force, but through the careful application of his own accumulated crimes against him. "You're tougher than I expected," Tyler admitted, though his tone suggested this wasn't necessarily a good thing. His confident demeanor showed the first hairline cracks as he watched Marcus methodically work through the jar's contents without breaking down. Most people would have given up by now, started crying or begging or something. "I'm full of surprises," Marcus replied, reaching for the sixth worm. His stomach felt like it was hosting a small earthquake, but his resolve remained unshakable. Each consumed worm represented another few minutes of data extraction, another step closer to Tyler's digital apocalypse. Around them, the cafeteria audience had grown. Word of the worm-eating spectacle had spread through the school's informal communication networks, and students from other lunch periods were finding excuses to pass through the area. Some looked disgusted, others fascinated, but all seemed to understand they were witnessing something that would become part of Riverside High's permanent folklore. "You know what I think?" Tyler continued, his voice carrying a note of psychological warfare. I think you're enjoying this. I think you like being the center of attention, even if it means humiliating yourself. California kids probably have to do all sorts of weird stuff to get noticed, right? Marcus didn't respond verbally, but his phone buzzed with another status update. Data extraction, 94% complete. All primary targets acquired. Initiating final protocols. The sixth worm seemed to resist more than the others, as if it somehow understood its fate and was fighting back. Marcus had to use his teeth to break it into smaller pieces, a process that generated additional texture sensations he immediately regretted experiencing. The act of chewing made everything worse. The earthy taste intensified, and he became acutely aware of the worm's segmented body structure. But as he swallowed the pieces, Marcus's phone delivered the notification he'd been waiting for. Operation Earthworm, Phase 2 initiated. All systems go. What happened next would become legendary in Riverside High folklore, and would eventually be studied in cybersecurity courses at universities across the country. As Marcus bit into the sixth worm, every phone in the cafeteria simultaneously received a notification. Not just the phones recording the worm-eating challenge, every single device connected to the school's Wi-Fi network, plus every device belonging to students regardless of their current connection status. Marcus's distribution system had been designed to reach maximum saturation across multiple networks and platforms simultaneously. The notification contained a simple message. Want to see what Tyler Brennan really does with his spare time? Check your email. But the message was just the opening salvo. Marcus had programmed his attack to unfold in carefully timed waves, each designed to maximize psychological impact while preventing Tyler from mounting any kind of defense or damage. Control effort. Tyler's face went from triumphant to confused, to horrified in the span of about 3 seconds. What the hell? His confusion turned to panic as students throughout the cafeteria began opening their emails and finding comprehensive dossiers on Tyler's surveillance operation. Screenshots of private conversations he'd intercepted, photos he'd stolen from other students' phones, financial information about families he'd gathered for blackmail purposes, chat logs showing Tyler's crew discussing which students to target next and how to maximize their psychological impact. But Marcus had gone far beyond simple evidence dumps. His system had automatically organized the information into easily digestible formats, timeline visualizations, showing the progression of Tyler's campaigns against individual students, network maps illustrating the connections between Tyler's crew and their family power structures, and statistical analyses demonstrating the scope and systematic nature of the surveillance operation. Each student received a personalized report, showing exactly how they'd been monitored, what information had been collected about them, and how that information had been used to manipulate their social standing, academic opportunities, or family relationships. The psychological impact was devastating. Students who'd never realized they were being watched suddenly understood that their most private moments had been Tyler's entertainment. The first wave revealed Tyler's spying on fellow students, but that was just the opening movement of Marcus's symphony of destruction. The second wave, arriving 30 seconds later, contained evidence of the illegal access to school district databases that Tyler's network had been conducting for months. Report cards, disciplinary records, college recommendation letters, standardized test scores. Tyler had been systematically harvesting educational data to use as ammunition against students and leverage against teachers. Marcus had discovered that Tyler's operation included detailed psychological profiles of every teacher at Riverside High, complete with information about their personal finances, family problems, and career vulnerabilities. Tyler had been using this intelligence to manipulate grades, influence disciplinary decisions, and even affect hiring and firing recommendations. But Marcus had saved the most devastating revelation for the third wave. As Marcus forced down the seventh worm, Fighting the urge to vomit, the final batch of emails arrived. These contained documentation of Tyler's family business dealings that would make front-page news across Nebraska and potentially trigger federal investigations spanning multiple states. Mark Brennan's construction company had been systematically overbilling the school district for projects, padding contracts by hundreds of thousands of dollars through a sophisticated scheme involving fake subcontractors, inflated material costs, and fraudulent change orders. The documentation showed that Tyler had been using his surveillance network to gather compromising information about school board members and district administrators, ensuring their compliance with the overbilling scheme. Kevin's mother had been providing confidential legal information from the prosecutor's office to help Tyler's family identify potential threats to their operation. She'd been sharing details about ongoing investigations, grand jury proceedings, and plea negotiations with people who should never have had access to that information. Jessica's father had been filing false police reports to intimidate potential whistleblowers, using his position as a lieutenant to launch bogus investigations into Tyler's enemies and their families. The evidence showed a pattern of abuse of power spanning 2 years, including harassment of families who'd tried to complain about Tyler's behavior, but the corruption network extended far beyond Tyler's immediate circle. Marcus had uncovered connections to city planning officials who'd been approving permits in exchange for political contributions, municipal judges who'd been dismissing charges against Tyler's associates, and even state-level politicians who'd been receiving donations from the Brennan family's various business entities. The cafeteria erupted into chaos as students processed what they were seeing. Parents were being called, screenshots were being shared across social media platforms, and local news outlets were receiving anonymous tips about the developing scandal. Tyler's carefully constructed social empire began crumbling in real time as his victims realized they finally had evidence of his crimes. Several students who'd been targeted by Tyler's operation began standing up and sharing their own experiences, creating an impromptu support group in the middle of the lunch period. Stories emerged of academic sabotage, social manipulation, family harassment, and psychological warfare that had been dismissed as teenage drama, but now appeared as part of a coordinated criminal enterprise. Marcus watched the unfolding chaos while continuing to mechanically consume worms. His stomach felt like it was hosting a revolution, but his mind was calm and focused. Everything was proceeding exactly as he'd planned. With one exception, the scale of the corruption he'd uncovered had exceeded even his pessimistic expectations. "You little bastard," Tyler snarled, lunging toward Marcus with his face contorted by rage and desperation. "What did you do? How did you?" But Tyler's attack was intercepted by Alex and Danny, who'd moved to flank their friend as soon as the digital evidence started flowing. Other students who'd been victims of Tyler's schemes were joining them, forming an impromptu protective barrier around Marcus. The power dynamic in the cafeteria had shifted completely in the span of less than 5 minutes. Marcus calmly set down the jar of worms and pulled out his phone, using his sleeve to wipe away some of the organic matter that had accumulated on his fingers. "I gave everyone the truth, Tyler. Isn't that what you always claimed to be interested in? Transparency and accountability? How did you?" Tyler's voice cracked as the reality of his situation began to sink in. Around him, his former allies were either fleeing the scene or frantically trying to delete evidence from their own devices, efforts that Marcus had anticipated and neutralized hours earlier through his automated backup systems. "You made several critical mistakes," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the chaos around them. The cafeteria had transformed from a lunch venue into something resembling a war zone, with students clustered around phones, teachers trying to restore order, and the general atmosphere of a major crisis unfolding in real time. "First, you assumed I was just another victim you could intimidate with your standard psychological warfare playbook. You treated me like every other kid who'd moved to Riverside, someone you could isolate, manipulate, and control through fear and social pressure. Marcus pulled up a terminal window on his phone and showed Tyler the screen. It displayed real-time logs of data being automatically forwarded to multiple destinations: the FBI's Cybercrime Division, the Nebraska State Attorney General's office, the local news media, and several national organizations that specialized in investigating political corruption. Second, you stored all your illegal surveillance data on servers owned by your parents' businesses. That gave me a legitimate legal framework for accessing the information under federal whistleblower protection statutes. Tyler's mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a fish removed from water. The reality of his situation was clearly overwhelming his ability to process and respond. But your biggest mistake, Marcus continued, was believing that technology was just a tool for you to use against other people. You never considered that someone might understand these systems better than you do, or that they might use that understanding to turn your own weapons against you. Marcus gestured toward the chaos surrounding them. Every piece of evidence now flowing across the internet came from your own servers, collected by your own surveillance systems, stored in files that you created. I didn't fabricate anything or plant false information. I simply organized your own documented crimes and made them publicly available. The sophistication of Marcus's counterattack was becoming clear as more details emerged from the evidence. DUMP. He hadn't just exposed Tyler's immediate operation. He'd traced the entire network of corruption back through years of financial records, communication logs, and business transactions. The investigation would eventually reveal connections spanning multiple states and involving dozens of public officials. Kevin tried to grab Marcus's phone, but the attempt was half-hearted and easily blocked by Danny. Kevin's face had gone pale as he realized that his own involvement in the surveillance operation was thoroughly documented, including his role in creating fabricated evidence and hacking into secure systems. "You can't prove I did anything illegal," Tyler said desperately, though his voice lacked conviction. Around him, students were reading direct quotes from his own communications, viewing screenshots he'd taken of private conversations, and examining financial records that showed exactly how his family's corruption scheme operated. Marcus smiled and pulled up another screen on his phone. "Actually, I can prove everything. See, when you hacked into the school district servers to access student records, you left digital fingerprints all over their system logs. When you accessed private social media accounts without authorization, you violated multiple federal statutes governing computer fraud and privacy invasion. And when you used that information to manipulate student elections, college recommendations, and academic assessments, you committed fraud on a scale that crosses state lines." The legal implications were staggering. Marcus had assembled evidence of crimes ranging from identity theft and computer fraud to bribery, conspiracy, and racketeering. The corruption network Tyler's family had built would require a multi-jurisdictional task force to fully investigate and prosecute. But Marcus had also included evidence of the psychological damage Tyler's operation had caused. Suicide attempts, academic failures, family breakups, and social isolation, all directly traceable to Tyler's systematic campaign of harassment and manipulation. The human cost of Tyler's power gains was documented in heartbreaking detail. The cafeteria doors burst open as Principal Henderson arrived with 2 security guards and what appeared to be several law enforcement officers. Word of the digital evidence dump had apparently reached the administration very quickly, though Marcus suspected that was because automated notifications had been sent to every school district employee simultaneously. Behind the administrators came parents who'd received copies of the evidence through Marcus's distribution system. Angry mothers and fathers who'd suddenly understood why their children had been struggling academically or socially, why family information had seemed to leak to other parents, why their kids had become withdrawn and anxious over the past months or years. "Mr. Brennan," Principal Henderson called out, his voice cutting through the chaos with the authority of someone who'd clearly been briefed on the situation by law enforcement. "I need you to come with us immediately." Tyler looked around desperately, searching for support from his former allies. But Kevin was already being questioned by one of the officers, his phone confiscated as evidence. Jessica had disappeared entirely, probably called away by her father, who'd realized his own career was about to implode. Madison stood frozen by the windows, staring at her phone with an expression of absolute horror as she processed the evidence of her own family's involvement in the corruption network. The students who'd once feared Tyler were now documenting his downfall with the same phones that had recorded Marcus's humiliation. The power dynamic had reversed so completely that Tyler appeared almost pathetic, a would-be emperor revealed to be wearing no clothes, standing alone in a room full of people who finally understood the truth about his operation. Marcus calmly picked up the jar of worms and dumped the remaining 3 into a nearby trash can. His stomach was still churning, but the nausea was now mixed with a profound sense of satisfaction. "Actually, Tyler, it is over. Your surveillance network is offline. Your evidence files have been compromised. Your family's business relationships are about to be terminated, and your entire power structure has been exposed as a criminal conspiracy." As Tyler was escorted from the cafeteria, he turned back toward Marcus with a look of pure hatred mixed with grudging respect. "This isn't over," he said, though the words lacked conviction. "Actually," Marcus replied, disposing of the empty worm jar in the same trash receptacle, "it really is. But thank you for the educational experience. I've learned more about systematic corruption in 1 week than most people learn in a lifetime." The next few hours passed in a blur of interviews with investigators, meetings with school administrators, and phone calls from reporters who'd received copies of the evidence. Marcus learned that his automated systems had been even more effective than he'd planned. The story was already trending on social media, and news outlets across the state were picking up the story of the high school surveillance scandal. By the end of the day, Mark Brennan's construction company had lost its contracts with the school district and was under investigation for fraud. Kevin's mother had been suspended from the prosecutor's office, pending a criminal investigation. Jessica's father was facing internal affairs scrutiny for his role in the cover-up. Tyler himself had been arrested on multiple federal charges related to computer fraud and identity theft. As Marcus walked home through the streets of Riverside, his phone buzzed with messages from classmates who wanted to thank him for exposing Tyler's operation. Students who'd been victimized for months were finally free to speak openly about their experiences. Zoe caught up with him as he reached his street. "So," she said with a grin, "how did those worms taste?" Marcus laughed, feeling lighter then. He had since arriving in Riverside. "Terrible, but totally worth it. What happens now?" Marcus looked back toward the school, where news vans were already gathering in the parking lot. Now Tyler and his family learn what happens when you mess with someone who actually knows how to use technology. That evening, as Marcus sat in his bedroom updating his applications and monitoring the continued fallout from the day's events, he received a text from his father. "Saw the news. Are you okay?" Marcus typed back, "Never better, Dad. Riverside's turning out to be exactly what we needed." Outside his window, the quiet streets of Riverside looked the same as they had when his family first arrived. But everything had changed. The balance of power had shifted, and the kids who'd lived in fear of Tyler Brennan were finally free. Marcus Chun had come to Riverside as the new kid trying to fit in. He was leaving the cafeteria that day as the student who'd single-handedly dismantled the most sophisticated bullying operation in the school's history, and he'd done it all with nothing more than code, determination, and a jar of earthworms. As he settled in for the evening, Marcus opened his laptop and began working on a new project, a secure communication platform for students who'd been victims of cyberbullying. Because if there was one thing he'd learned from his first week in Riverside, It was that technology was only as dangerous as the person using it. And Marcus Chun was definitely one of the good guys. Up next, you've got two more standout stories. Right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.